Welcome back to Adam Talks NFL. I feel like a lot of times in the NFL, players just do not get the recognition that they deserve. They don't get any awards for their leadership, their play on the field, their mentality. They don't get anything. But in today's episode, I'm going to be giving out player awards for every single AFC East team. So that'll include the Buffalo Bills, the New York Jets, the Miami Dolphins, and the New England Patriots. What I'll be giving out is a MVP, Offensive Defensive Player of the Year, Best Rookie, Most Surprising, and Most Disappointing Player for every single one of those teams. And once again, thank you so much for tuning into this video. A like, a subscribe, a comment would even help to grow the channel. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers by the end of April. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in to the Buffalo Bills. And having this be my favorite team, it's easy to talk about some of these players. We'll start off with the MVP going to Josh Allen. We can kind of tell right away that when he is off the field, this team looks completely different compared to when he is on the field. When he's off the field, this team just did not look functional, did not look like a great team at all. When he's on the field, this team could be a Super Bowl caliber team. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're hoping in 2026 it'll be our year. But I mean, 3,600 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, attack on 600 yards through the ground. Josh Allen has been an MVP type player, for the past 2 or 3 years now. And I think it's pretty much unanimous to have Allen be the MVP. When it comes to value for the team, he just provides the most for us. And I think we hope to have him around as our franchise piece for a decade to come now. James Cook is easily also going to win the Offensive Player of the Year. You could have also given it to Josh Allen, but James Cook just had a really incredible season. He was the NFL rushing leader with 1,621 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns, 5.2 yards per carry. Those are incredible numbers for a running back. He also had 300 yards through the air and 2 touchdowns tacked on alongside there. A Pro Bowl, a second-team All-Pro. He really just did it all for Buffalo, and I think that he definitely earns the rights to have the Offensive Player of the Year go to him for Buffalo. We also have Christian Benford as the Defensive Player of the Year. He purely just really developed himself into the pure cornerback one for this team. When he was on the field, he was really incredible, and you could actually see the presence when he was off the field. We just kind of get beat in coverage. But Christian Benford, one key takeaway that I love to kind of go back on is the interception he had on Joe Burrow in the Cincinnati Bengals game. Pretty much Joe Burrow just a little flick up on the line of scrimmage, and Benford was right there to pick the ball off, take it to the house for about a 50-yard pick six. But he also had 2 interceptions on the year, was pretty solid in both man and zone coverage, and was just a key defensive playmaker throughout most of the season. Another key defensive playmaker was Deon Walker. He, really was the, powerhouse in the middle of the defensive line. He had a couple big plays here and there, a couple sacks within the season, had an interception on Bo Nix in the divisional round playoff game. But Deon Walker really was just a presence in the middle of that defense. As I just mentioned, he was a good tackler, a good run defender, and hopes are high for him to really develop himself into a pure nose tackle in this Jim Leonhard 3-4 defense. We also have Cole Bishop, who really stepped into the role of being a centerpiece of this defense. He really, stepped up from being a backup and, being on the injured list last season to really developing himself into the starter for Buffalo. 4 interceptions throughout his, play here. And I think that overall he really, took a step up to be the most surprising player. He took a step up. And I think he will definitely be another centerpiece at the safety spot. You obviously are a couple years removed from Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. So Cole Bishop, I don't know if he'll have the exact production that they had, but he's definitely kind of shining in the role of being the next man up at the safety spot. And then the most disappointing player is going to go to Keon Coleman. I think this is kind of heavily related to the media outlet stuff. The media just doesn't seem to like Keon Coleman just for no reason at all. I just think that he still is developing himself into the prototypical X receiver that I think we hope he will become. I think that, there's definitely a room to grow, obviously, as there is for a lot of players in this league. But Keon Coleman just did not really live up to the expectations that were kind of put on him in 2025. I hope that he can, be a better player in 2026. But I think just 2025 is just a year to forget for him. And I hope he comes back and kind of has the mind of a goldfish where he just doesn't even affect him in any way possible. So Keon Coleman for now will be the most disappointing player. Next up for the Miami Dolphins, we have Devon Achane winning the MVP as well as the Offensive Player of the Year. I think that, I mean, especially with the injuries to Tyreek Hill, to Jalen Waddle, the disappointments from Tua Tagovailoa, rather, I think it's very obvious that it's going to have to go to Devon Achane. 1,350 rushing yards, 5.7 yards per play, 8 rushing touchdowns, all good seasons, all good stats for a running back. We also tack on the receiving yards, about 500 on the season, and 12 total touchdowns. He also eclipsed 4 more through the air. So Devon Achane really just kind of paved a way for himself to be the leader of this offense in the back half of the year. It seemed like the Dolphins were just about done with Tua, but Devon Achane still was cooking, and he was still kind of able to move this offense. They were kind of hoping maybe to find a sliver of a playoff spot, but they're the Dolphins. That doesn't really happen for them too often. But yeah, so Devon Achane easily kind of takes home the Offensive Player of the Year and the MVP spot for Miami. Next up for the Defensive Player of the Year spot, it's going to go to Jordan Brooks, the linebacker. He really just kind of was the only shining spot on this defense. The first team All-Pro, 183 total tackles. Brooks just really was a tackling machine for him, someone who can be a solid run defender, someone who also can do some coverage stuff, but I mean also you tack on 3.5 sacks. So he was a quality defender, someone who you can rely on in terms of trying to have the ball not really move any forward, not get first downs. And like I mentioned, was one of the only shining spots on this defense as well. Another shining spot, however, was Jordan Phillips, the defensive tackle. Being a rookie this season and not being a first round or second round guy, it's tough to really get playing time, but Jordan Phillips almost took on the role of what Kenneth Grant was supposed to do, but Grant obviously dealing with injuries, dealing with just a lack of playing time. Phillips kind of stepped into that role, was a solid interior defender, someone who was a good run stopper, someone who really kind of elevated himself into the interior defensive starter spot. And I think that as he continues to grow, continues to, acclimate himself to NFL talent, he definitely will become a much better player, I hope, in years to come. And then also Rasul Douglas is going to be the most surprising player. I didn't know this before doing research on this video, but Rasul Douglas is, I believe, over 30 years old and one of the only corners to be over 30 still remaining in the league. But Rasul Douglas, I mean, still seems to be playing at an elite level, multiple turnovers, a solid, a key defender, someone who, can really play the boundary, could also play more of a slot role. So Rasul Douglas in 2025 for the Dolphins played pretty well. And yeah, despite being kind of an older player, as I mentioned, he's, I believe, 31. That makes sense. Yeah. Despite being 31 years old, he still really is a key contributor to this defense. And, he's bounced around to a couple teams throughout his career, but maybe he can find a new home in Miami now that he's kind of contributing at a higher level. And then, I mean, lastly, the most disappointing player easily has to be Tua Tagovailoa. He really just didn't do a whole lot for his team, unfortunately. I think for the contract that he has, being a, multi-millionaire, you kind of expect him to be, you kind of expect him to play at the level that he's being paid at. And he just didn't really see that from Tua in 2025. As we know, just got traded to the Atlanta Falcons. And I don't really know what they're going to do with him, especially with Michael Penix being there. You have 2 left-handed quarterbacks. So Tua Tagovailoa, it seems like the time was over for him in Miami, even before he left. But I just think that when you're getting benched for a rookie, especially a guy who was a day 3 guy, it just doesn't look good for you. And I think that you hope he can bounce back in Atlanta, but it might be possible that his time as a starter is just about done. The New England Patriots are the next team up, and similarly to the Miami Dolphins, Drake May is going to win MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, this guy really did it all for his team, man. He obviously took him to a Super Bowl, obviously, played through the rest of the playoffs and beat some pretty solid teams like the Texans and the Broncos as well. So Drake May really just kind of outshone his, the potential that he had being an early, round 1 guy. You hope for him to be the next Tom Brady, if that's even possible. But Drake May is definitely making himself known in the National Football League. One play that comes to mind in terms of his toughness and his grittiness comes from when he was playing Buffalo. It was in New England, and it was a big run by TreVeyon Henderson, as we'll get to in a little bit. But TreVeyon Henderson was running. and Drake May was down the field and he was blocking on maybe Tre'Davious White or Cole Bishop or one of those Buffalo defensive backs, and he was, really protecting his team, trying to, make the best play for the team to win. And I think that's really important for New England to have a guy like that, because there are teammates that won't do that. They won't, sacrifice themselves in order to make the team better. And I think having a guy like Drake May, especially being your quarterback, being your leader, it's pretty obvious that he really will, be the future of New England. And I think that the more that people recognize that, the more that he'll really kind of grow into that role for sure. And then Christian Gonzalez is the defensive player of the year. You don't really have to say a lot about him, but he's just a lockdown. When he's on the field, when he's not dealing with injuries, he can guard anybody on the field, whether it's, your top wide receiver, your tight end, your running back. He can really do it all for you. And so it's pretty obvious that Gonzo is going to win the defensive player of the year for New England. You could have given it to other guys like, Carlton Davis, the other cornerback. You could have given it to Kayvon Chason, who I'll mention in a bit, but it's got to go to Gonzo. He's just the best player on this defense and arguably is the best cornerback in the league. Then Travion Henderson's going to be getting the best rookie award. You could have given it to a couple guys like Will Campbell. I didn't give it to him just because of the playoff faults that he had, but Travion Henderson really just kind of, despite the lack of touches that he had in the playoffs, he still was a key contributor to this team, someone who provided an element of speed, of cutback, of direction that you don't really get from Ramondre Stevenson, as I'll mention in a bit. But Travion Henderson just really shown who he was, really showed who he was throughout the whole 2025 season. I think that he will definitely become more of a workhorse back in 2026, and I'm just excited for what the future holds for a guy like Henderson, who I'm just personally a fan of because of his, his outside of football stuff that I really just take into consideration there. Then Kayvon Chason is going to be the most surprising. You pick him up on a 1-year deal, New England does, and I think you don't expect a whole lot from a guy like Chason, who I think many argue is a first-round bust, but Chason comes in, gets 7.5 sacks. He gets a lot of promise and praise for being one of the better defensive players for New England. And in the offseason, he just got a nice deal to go to Washington. So I think it's on the up and up for Chason as he continues to really develop himself into potentially a starting defensive end in the near future. And then Ramondre Stevenson is going to be the most disappointing player. I just don't personally like the way that he runs, and maybe this is just a bias thing, but I think that Travion Henderson just loads better than Ramondre Stevenson. He just seems like he fumbles a lot. He seems like he just doesn't seem like he has a lot of, consistency when it comes to his play. He did have a touchdown in the Super Bowl, which obviously is nice. It was a nice grab, and he kind of just pushed himself in there, but I think that Stevenson definitely is better in terms of a 1-2 punch type of running back. Like, he needs somebody else there to really kind of elevate himself in a sense, if that makes sense. And I think that Stevenson just doesn't really do a whole lot of the workhorse running back tendencies, types, and all that. But I just think that overall, Henderson just needs to be a little bit more consistent, a little bit more, safe with the ball. Had some fumbling issues earlier in his career, has picked it up a little bit, but I just don't think that Stevenson really contributed a whole lot to this offense at the end of the day. And last but not least, the New York Jets are up. Breece Hall is going to be the MVP. Had a sneaky good season for himself. And I think that he was actually he was probably the best player on offense, maybe the best player on the Jets last season, but I think that Breece Hall really just needs to find a way to, kind of promote himself in a sense. Like I mentioned, he had a very, sneaky season running and receiving. And I think a lot of people don't even see that because obviously the lack of, greatness from the New York Jets in the past couple of years, but also just the other, controversy. We'll mention Justin Fields in a bit, and we'll mention Garrett Wilson in just a second, but Breece Hall just kind of flies under the radar for a lot of people's shoes. I don't believe he's ever made a Pro Bowl before, but he's definitely deserving of one, and definitely somebody that I'm hoping will actually just continue to grow himself and grow into a much more, not promising, but a much more persistent player is probably the better word to use there. But Breece Hall easily takes home the MVP. And despite the Jets team just not being great, he definitely was a solid player for this team. And then Garrett Wilson, obviously up next, dealt with a lot of injuries. I don't think he played most of the 2025 season, but when he was on the field, he was the only target that Justin Fields slash the Jets quarterbacks had. I think that he just needed to essentially stay healthy is pretty much the better term for it. And I think that Garrett Wilson just really is one of the better receivers in this league. It's just the injury concerns that do scare me a bit, but he just is able to move so fluidly. He's able to catch the ball with a lot of, safety and precaution, just trying to keep the ball out of harm's way. And I think that's really important, especially when you might be having a new quarterback this season. Either it's going to be Geno Smith or maybe Ty Simpson, or, who knows if they go with Brady Cook again. You don't know how that'll work out. But Garrett Wilson just takes home the Offensive Player of the Year range. And I think that as long as he stays healthy, he can continue to be one of the top receivers in the league by far. It's very tough to also then find a Defensive Player of the Year for this team. If you do not know, the New York Jets had 0 interceptions between all of their players throughout the 2025 season. So I just did not feel like giving it to, defensive back. I could have given it to Quinnen Williams, but he got traded, so I'm not going to give it to him. I'm going to give it here to Jamien Sherwood. Excuse me. I'm going to give it here to Jamien Sherwood. He was, one of the better linebackers in the league last year. 154 total tackles, 71 solo tackles, 2 sacks. Really was just able to be a good run defender, be a good, passing defender somewhat. Obviously, as I mentioned, no interceptions there, but had 8 passes defended as well. So really took a step up from how he performed last season. And I think really carved himself into being the potential starting linebacker for the Jets for years to come. And the best rookie was Armand Membu. This offensive line already is good when it is healthy, but Armand Membu really held up the right side of the line and again had a really sneaky year for himself. Played 1,047 snaps for the team, played in all 17 games, so he was a solid anchor on the right side of the line. Had a couple penalties here or there, a holding, a couple false starts, a couple, things to improve on, but those are just rookie things, I would say. And then having Armand Membu, kind of paired up with Olufashinu on the other side of the line, that makes for a good tackle duo. And I think that Membu definitely, like I mentioned, has kind of solidified himself as probably the best offensive lineman in this draft. And I think that, New York kind of are continuing to build their offensive line either through the draft or through some solid free agency moves. But Membu for sure definitely, paved a way for himself to be one of the best offensive tackles in the league. Next up for the New York Jets is going to be Isaiah Williams, the kick returner and the punt returner. And I think that this is definitely one of the most surprising players just in the entire league because, he was with the Detroit Lions for a bit. He was with the Cincinnati Bengals, really almost paved a way for himself to be one of the better players for the Jets offense in 2025. He had 26 catches, 193 yards, no touchdowns, but where he did contribute the most was when it came to returning. He had 28 returns for 396 yards, 2 punt return touchdowns for Williams in 2025, the most in his career. And really just to have any punt return in general is impressive, but have 2 in one season really solidified himself as maybe being the future kick returner for the New York Jets. And I think that you can use him in a lot of ways as a receiver, maybe as a wide receiver 3 or 4, but most importantly as a kick returner and someone who can really be a solid special teams contributor going forward. And then last but not least, it's going to be Justin Fields as the most disappointing player for your team. I think that the expectation for Justin Fields in 2025 was for him to be who we saw him as rather with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2024. Someone who is purely a dual threat guy, someone who can do it through his legs or through the air. I think that's how you kind of saw him going from college as well. But Justin Fields, especially with the injuries, especially with the, just the lack of good production from him, the lack of good play, I think that he just didn't do what he was supposed to do for New York. And it's the sad reality for some of these guys that you come in for a specific purpose. You come in to lead a team that's still developing, it's still growing. And sometimes it's not always the player's fault, but just the situation that they put themselves in. And Fields just signed a deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe they can use him in some cool packages with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Fields out there at the same time, similar to how the Bears did it with Caleb Williams and Tyson Bagent. But Justin Fields overall, I think just you expect a lot from someone like him, especially how he kind of played with the Steelers in 2024, not in a starter role, but just in a contributing role for the team. And I just don't think that you saw that a whole lot from Fields this season, unfortunately. Well, that's going to do it for episode 1 of the NFL Player Awards. We're going to be doing the AFC North next. That's going to be the Ravens, the Bengals, the Browns, and the Steelers. Stay tuned for that video. It's going to be coming out in the next couple days. But with that being said, I'm Adam Talks NFL. Thank you so much for watching.